Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am Jen Sugarmeyer, your host of Mindset in the Morning, brought to you by none other than Higher in Heels. And thank you so much for tuning in today. First, if you could subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any of the great content, we are actually live 5 days a week at 6 a.m. Central Standard Time. And the whole point is to become intentional about our days. And so that's why I do it. In fact, last week on the show, we talked about get to versus have to. And that was such a big thing because this morning I was a little bit tired and I was like, but I get to go on the show. And that made all the difference. So when we start to understand our words, when we start to understand different mindsets and we start to normalize some of the things that we go through on a day-to-day basis, it just makes life easier to navigate. We're more equipped, we're more educated, and we can just move through with ease. That's really what the show is all about. And today we're talking about normalizing pivoting. Yesterday we talked about when should you pivot, and little asterisk, I can't make that decision. So you can't say, I was listening to Jen Sugarmeyer, she said to pivot. And also, a lot of times we talk about pivoting in entrepreneurial space or in the workplace, but this is everything. I mean, we could say pivot is the same thing as change, right? When should we make a change? When do we change what we're doing? It's kind of like in boxing, when you're like pivoting. Yeah, it's kind of like that. So, excuse me, yesterday we talked about when should you pivot and when shouldn't you pivot? And so we made some general suggestions, and it's only up to you. Only you can decide if they're going to, if it's the right time for you. I can't help with those, but especially not knowing any details. But that there were some general suggestions that we went through yesterday. So today we're going to normalize why it can be a little, sometimes we drag our feet a little bit. I don't know. Think about a time that you were like, I want to make a change, but so let's normalize this because I think so many of us go through this, whether, to be frank, I was married and then I was divorced, and that pivot in my life was a big one. And it didn't feel good. And there were a lot of feelings that I went through, ahead of time. In my personal business, I've had to pivot. In fact, we recently changed the name of the show from Higher in Heels, that is the name of the company, to Mindset in the Morning, which was always the original idea. We changed it to Mindset in the Morning, and it is brought to you by Higher in Heels. So just little pivots like that. But it can be sometimes there are feelings or there are things going on inside of us that keep us from pivoting. So let's normalize them. Let's talk about them so we know that we're normal, and that as we're coming up on things that we may go through that these may keep us from pivoting, or, just know that you're not alone in these. So you could be afraid. let's not sugarcoat it. You could be afraid to pivot. I mean, you've been going down this path and this is all you know. And to try something new can be scary. Anytime there's change or anytime, it can be intimidating. It can be scary for us. And it's more comfortable to do what we know. So we just stay where we're at. And that's, I think, very common for a lot of us. Again, think of pivoting in all areas of your life. And again, I'm not here to tell you abandon your marriage, abandon your business. No, we talked about when you should and when you shouldn't. And a lot of times when we pivot, it's because we've been going towards something and it's not yielding the results, and maybe the time and the resources and the energy at some point is more than what the output is. And so there's that line of when do we keep going down this road, which isn't yielding the results? Like maybe it was a great idea. Maybe it was a great business idea or a great relationship or a great, I bought a piece of property. I thought thought, man, this is going to be great. I'm going to build my dream home. And at some point, I had to say, abandon ship. I've wasted so much money and I've had to do all these things. And guess what? This just isn't going to work. So I just had to pivot. I sold the property and I said, done. So that is an example of pivoting. I just had to, but I had invested. I mean, I lost about $40,000. So yeah, that was kind of a big thing. I'm like, I just want this to work out. But at some point, when are you investing more than when you're getting back? And do you see the light at the end of the tunnel as a freight train? Or is it like truly light at the end of the tunnel and you're like, I'm almost there? And you got to assess that for yourself. But I mean, it can be scary. It can be scary to make these changes. I mean, maybe you've made this massive financial investment, just like my property. Man, but I've spent all this money. I don't want to change because all this money is sunk into this thing, whatever you are doing. Yeah, I think that's very valid. That's a very valid concern for us to think about, how much money, and then maybe you start thinking about, wow, I had investors and then, I'm going to have to tell them and how am I going to pay them back? And so money can be a big thing. I mean, money is one of the largest contributors to divorce because it's so huge. Money is just a really sensitive issue on so many levels. And so it's a hard thing for us to wrap our head around sometimes because, they say money doesn't grow on trees. I mean, it takes a lot to get money. I mean, for the most of us, maybe you're just like banking it. But for most of us to be able to go get the money and the funds and all of that, and maybe it's just sweat equity. You've put a lot of time into something. That's also equity. There's financial equity. There's also time equity. Like you have spent so much time trying to build and do. Do you just abandon ship? Is that really what you want to do? I mean, you've spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours. Is it a waste? Like, are you wasting that time? I mean, again, I go back to what we talked about yesterday. And are you continuing to put your time into something and you're not getting those results back? And if that continues on that same trajectory, I mean, how much more time and money are you willing to invest, you know, and not get the results that you want? And, here's the truth. You can continue down whatever path that you want. Absolutely. Whether that be relationships, a property that you purchased, a business, anything. You can continue down any and just keep going. But you have to be okay with that. Whatever decision you make, remember we talked about accountability. You have to be okay with the decisions that you're making. So if you say, I'm going to continue down this path, I am not ready to change. Okay, well, then if things don't work out, you have to be okay with accepting that. You have to accept that. That's a decision. These are all decisions that you make. So I know it sounds kind of, it can be one of these topics that are a little, I don't know, because we want things to work out. We don't like talking about when things don't, and money that just disappears and time that just disappears or wasted or whatever you want to call it. I mean, and we're going to talk tomorrow about wasted and failure and all this stuff. And because words matter. Yep. So we're going to normalize those tomorrow. But it's tough for us to think about, what is actually, wasted and just it doesn't feel good. But the truth is, whatever decision you make, you have to be okay with. You've got to take ownership of it and say, you know what? I can abandon ship at any time. And if I choose to have this go on longer, then that's a choice that I make. and I have to be okay with the results. And that's where a lot of times, and I'm not going to veer too far off the path here, but that's where a lot of times, we start to blame others, or we get really angry, or we're, looking for excuses. And the truth is, that's a decision that you made. And so you have to accept it. And so you're going to find so much more peace in your life when you understand acceptance, when you say, look, I'm making the decision, I own it, I accept it, I take accountability, I'm responsible for it. And whatever the outcome is, that's the outcome. You'll find a lot more peace in that instead of fighting it. Like, oh, this decision, no, that was you. That was all on you. So you just learn and you move on. So with that, I am going to move on. Resources. Maybe you put tons of resources into this, and maybe they were material resources, and maybe they were non-material resources, like, other people that were involved. And, maybe you're building this company, and you've got all these people that working to make a product. And so it's not just you that's involved in this thing, but it's other people as well. And what about them? And so you get in your head of, okay, I've put in money, I've put in time, and I've put in resources. I mean, maybe you're building something, and you went to your place where, your where you keep all your supplies and everything, and you just cleared out all your supply closet. And so instead of where you could have used those somewhere else, you use them towards this project. So that was your cushion. That was your cushion of supplies that you could have used somewhere else. And now you don't have a cushion of supplies. I don't know what it is. But you're like, I've put so much into this. How can I just pivot? How can I do this? There's too much here, too much. And we hold on to these things. We do. We hold on to them. Like, I own that time. I own that money. I own those resources. And you know what happens? Here's the truth. If we're holding on to them and not willing to let go, it's us telling ourselves that there's a lack. There's a lack. Like, I'll never get that time back. I'll never get that money back. I'll never get those resources back. And so we've got to learn to just say, you know what? There's an abundance. Like, how much of a change would that be if we just said, hey, there's an abundance of time and resources and money? How much would that then change the way that we looked at the situation? So we'll talk about that more another time. That was just a little, because I want to give you something. I don't want to just talk about all the reasons that keep us. So we get worried about what people think. The truth is, we worry about what people are going to think. I did. In my marriage, I was like, okay, well, nobody in my family has been divorced. Okay, maybe I have some aunts. Maybe I have one cousin. But nobody's been divorced. What are they going to think of me? And I just went through these mind games of like, this is going to be my life forever. And then at some point I said, you know what? This is a decision that I'm going to have to live with for the rest of my life. And this isn't a marriage that I want to live with for the rest of my life. And again, I'm not advocating that you just jump ship. So please don't mistake me. Go get counseling, do much more than I ever did, because that's something that, you can't take back. Like, once your divorce is done, although, I've heard some people get back together, but like, that's a permanent thing. So do everything that you can to save your marriage and do all that. So I'm not advocating like, oh, not working out, just jump ship. Do what you need to do. Okay. That's that. So I want to be really clear on that. But whether it's, again, relationships, or we're talking about business. Maybe you told all of your friends that you had this great business idea. Oof, please, I have done this plenty of times. Ooh, this is what Jen's working on today. I'm one of these people that, like, I go and I've got these ideas, and, and I'm like, this is what I've got going on. I have these 10 things and whatever. And they're like, okay, Jen, and I've had to go back to the well and say, you know what? It didn't work out the way that I thought it was going to. Like my business partner, gonna put air quotes. Like I made this big announcement, like, oh, business partner, great. That was not great at the end, but the lessons that I got from it were really, really impactful in my life. But here I made this huge announcement, put it on the social media and yada, yada, yada. And even as of last night, I had somebody ask me, like, hey, remember that business partner you had? Like, what happened with all that? So sometimes we just care what other people think, and it's easier to stick with it and make it work versus explaining to other people that there were changes. What are they gonna think? Are they gonna think badly of me? Are they gonna look down on me? Are they gonna trust me? Are they and we get into this mind game of, what are they thinking? And yeah, that can drain our energy. It can. And so what did I say last night? Well, here's what it was. I just went through it. There wasn't any emotional attachment or anything. I just went through it. But the truth is, again, because today we're just normalizing what keeps us from pivoting. Yeah, we care what other people think. Deep down, even if we're like, doesn't matter. I don't care. I don't care what you think. Yeah, yeah. A lot of us kind of do. And that keeps us here. That keeps us here. Like, ooh, I'm stuck. Or maybe it's here. Mind or heart? I don't know. We're all connected. So we care what people think. Maybe truly you are just stuck on that idea that it's going to work. You're like, I know it's going to work. Just give me 5 more minutes. I'm going to make it work. Just 3 more days. This thing is going to happen. What we birth up here and in here, but what we birth up here, they mean something to us. We've put a lot of thought into them, and it's hard to just give up the ghost sometimes. Like, that's your baby. Again, maybe it's like your business partner, like I just talked about. You're like, man, I put a whole lot of thought into that, and man, that just didn't work out. Man, that thing I wanted to build and create and the vision that I had. Do you know how many businesses pivot? Yeah. Like most of them. I'm going to come back with some actual facts. We're going to be talking about, because we're talking about pivoting all week long. So most businesses are pivoting because the ideas that they have maybe the results aren't what they thought they were going to. So you got to know when to pivot. And how quickly do you do that? How much of that time, again, go back and listen to yesterday's. How much time do you invest in something before you say, oh my gosh, this isn't yielding the results? How much time? And again, I can't tell you when that fine line is for you. But when we pivot and we shift, but what keeps us from making that move is because we are so set that we want that thing to happen. But at some point, do we need to realize that we're doing this round peg, square hole? How does it work? Round peg, square hole. It's just not working. It's just not working. Like, it's a great idea, but the world might not want to consume it, or it's just not working out, whatever it is. So we got to learn to just let go. And we'll talk about that later this week. But let's normalize. So we talked about a lot of different things. Maybe we're afraid. Quite frankly, we are just afraid to make change. And that's okay. It's okay to be fearful. Change is a weird thing. It just is. Change was easy, we'd probably do it a lot more. But we don't know what's on the other side of what we don't know. So we could be afraid. We could have a little bit of fear. You've made a financial investment in whatever you're doing, most likely. Or you've made a time investment. Or you've made a resource investment. or all of those things. And you think, man, I've sunk so much from a monetary standpoint, whether it's time, resources, money. I have so much money invested in this thing. We're worried about what other people are going to think. What are they going to think of me if I make this change? What are they going to say? And then lastly, we just get stuck on this idea that it will work, just a little bit more time. And you know what? That's okay if you decide that you just want to take that little bit more time. But again, it comes down to accountability. You got to be okay with the decisions that you're making. Maybe it will work. Maybe it will. But you got to ask yourself, is the time, the resources, the energy, are you getting back what you think? So we're going to leave it at that because we are at 20 minutes. I am just excited. This was a great talk today. Yes, we've got a lot more talking about pivoting tomorrow, Words Matter Wednesday, and we're going to be talking about some words that keep us from pivoting. So how do we end this? We're coming up. We want the world to know. We're gonna let it show. That's right, because we're coming up. We want the world to know. We're gonna let it show. I'll see you here tomorrow. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. I will see you here tomorrow talking about pivoting. That's right. See ya.